So let's go back to our hierarchy here. So user exec mode, you're not going to spend a whole lot of time in user exec mode. You're not. If there's anything that you want to do, any function or feature or service you want to enable on your device, you're going to have to elevate your privileges. So you have to move into privileged exec mode in order to accomplish that. And you can see here that we are in privileged exec mode because we have the octothorpe symbol, or the pound sign, or the hashtag symbol, or the tic-tac-toe symbol, whatever you want to call it. There's so many names for that symbol. In this case, you are greater than the router. You are greater than the switch. You have complete control now. You are in charge. But how did we get there? We got there because we typed in enable. That's right. In user exec mode, we typed in the command enable, and by typing in enable, we moved from user exec mode into privilege exec mode. So let's examine that in a little more detail here. Let's go up to our privilege exec mode, and we'll see that privilege exec mode is going to give us the ability to examine our device in extreme detail. Extreme detail. So we'll be able to issue show commands that we could not issue in user exec mode. We'll be able to analyze the configuration itself. We'll be able to debug as well, meaning that I could look at real-time statistics as the traffic's flowing through the device. Not a recommended practice in the real world, because debugging is very resource intensive as well, as the device monitors and analyzes and decodes every single packet that's flowing through the device or every single frame. So let's try not to use debugging too much in the real world unless it's absolutely necessary. But now we can configure the device as well. So we have the configuration abilities, we have the debugging abilities, we have the ability to examine our device in detail. So privilege exec mode, yeah, we are elevating our privileges, giving ourselves the maximum amount of privileges here when we type in enable. So we're going to have access to those critical commands that we need to perform our configuration and our management tasks. As I described to you earlier, we typed in enable in order to go from user exec mode to privilege exec mode, and we see that example down here at the bottom. And what I want you to realize right now is that there was no password that was required of us, was there? No, not at all. At no point in time did the device say, hey, wait a second, you're going from having guest level view only access to full out administrative rights to this device. How about you give me your password? No, there was none. So at some point in time, we're going to have to set up a password. So there's no password by default, but we will want to set up a password. It's called an enable password. Password protecting the movement from user exec mode to privilege exec mode. So we're password protecting that enable command. But there's two different ways we can do it, which we'll discuss later. One is just by typing in enable password, and the other one's by typing in enable secret. The difference is enable passwords are stored in clear text in your configuration, whereas the enable secret password is stored as a hash value inside the running config. So my recommendation is that you want to use the enable secret password command going forward on all your devices, if you haven't already started to do so, to set up that password that is going to protect your movement from user exec mode to privilege exec mode. So if you do have password protection set up, it will ask you for your password at this point in time when you type in enable, and then you type in the password. And then once you have successfully connected, you will see the pound symbol. And if you ever need to move back to user exec mode from privilege exec mode, you just type in disable, and it'll move you back to user exec mode. So let's go back now to our hierarchy and analyze that hierarchy in a little more detail. And we'll see here from this hierarchy that once we're in privilege exec mode, we're going to have a lot more commands at our disposal. But one of the big commands here that I want you to focus on is the configure command. So we're not going to do any configuration of our device in privilege exec mode. Now, there is the odd time where you might issue a command in privilege exec mode. For example, if I want to set up the VTP primary server, I do that in privilege exec mode with the VTP primary command to do so. But majority of configurations are going to be done in global configuration mode. So I type in configure terminal, and now I'm in global configuration mode. And you know you're in global configuration mode when you see the host name followed by config in brackets followed by your pound symbol. And then in global configuration mode, I have the ability to perform commands that would affect my device on a global scale. Meaning, let's change the host name. If I change the host name, that affects the whole device. If I set up that enable secret password, it affects the whole device. So those are commands that affect the whole device. But also, if Cisco deemed there was no value in placing a command in a sub-configuration mode. Then they threw the command in global configuration mode as well. So global configuration mode contains the commands that affect the device as a whole, and also contains those commands that Cisco said, hey, we're just going to throw them in global configuration mode. So that's why it's so important that you know where to go to perform the function you want to perform. So if your goal is to set up encapsulation on an interface, well, you know you have to go to interface configuration mode to do that. If you want to set up a routing protocol, then you have to go to the routing protocol configuration mode. If you want to set a host name, then you go to global configuration mode. So regardless of whether you know the command or not, that's not the point. The point is, hey, do I know which configuration mode I have to go to in order to issue the command that I don't really know yet? Having that is going to be more beneficial to you than memorizing all the commands, because you'll never memorize the commands. I've been doing this for ages, folks, and I still haven't memorized all the commands. Why? Because I have more important things to put in my brain. So I know where to go to issue the commands. I just don't know the commands. So you might say, well, then how do I know what to type? I'll show you about context-sensitive help and word help later on. So you'll rely on that more heavily. But now let's say you want to configure an interface, or you want to configure your routing protocols, or you want to configure passwords for VTY lines, or passwords for the console ports, or you want to set up modem commands, whatever you need to do. Then you're going to go into the respective configuration mode for those. So for interfaces, you go to interface configuration mode. If you want to set up a routing protocol, you go to routing protocol configuration mode. And notice how the prompts change, right? So if I'm in interface configuration mode, it's now config-if. If we go here for the routing protocol, it's config-router. If we go to our VTY lines or our console port, you'll see that it says config-line. Config-line for us. So you know which mode you're in based on the prompt. So let's get to that point where we know where to go to perform the actions we need to perform, and we'll learn the commands as we go along.